Welcome to the Noble Bereans video channel. I'm your host, Steve Sanders. What do you do when the most powerful man in the world asks you an impossible question and your life depends on the answer? Now, last week we saw Daniel resolve to not defile himself with the king's food. That was a private act of faithfulness that nobody would notice. This week, though, Daniel faces a very public test, and the stakes? His life and the lives of everyone he works with. But here's what's fascinating. This crisis doesn't start with Daniel. It starts with a pagan king having nightmares about God's kingdom. Daniel 2 shows us something remarkable. God isn't just working through his faithful people. He's actually working through pagan rulers who don't even know him. Today, we're going to see how Daniel navigates impossible circumstances and what it teaches us about engaging power structures without selling our souls. To understand the pressure that Daniel faced, we need to understand how Babylonian wisdom worked. This was almost an industry, a Babylonian wisdom industry. Babylon was the ancient world's center of learning, astronomy and mathematics and medicine and literature. But their wisdom was inseparable from divination, reading omens, interpreting dreams, and consulting the stars. The kings employed a massive bureaucracy of wise men. Now, these were magicians and enchanters and sorcerers and Chaldeans, once a race of people, but now they were a priestly, scholarly class, or a caste, if you will, specializing in these arts. Now, generally, these people weren't con artists. They genuinely believed they could access hidden knowledge through proper techniques. But as you'll see in a moment, this was questioned. Dreams were considered messages from the gods, and interpreting them was serious business with established methods. But they were given an impossible demand in verses 1 through 13. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that deeply troubled him, and the text says his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. He summoned his wise men with an unprecedented demand. Tell me what I dreamed and what it means. Now, why? Why would he do this? Why would he demand that they tell him what the dream was as well? Verse number 9 hints at his reasoning. He says, "You have conspired to say a lying and deceitful word to me until the circumstances will change. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can tell me its explanation." He suspects they've been making things up. And if they can tell him the dream without revealing it, he'll know that their interpretation is genuine. Now, there may be one other explanation. It's possible Nebuchadnezzar didn't remember the whole dream, which was thought of in this time as a curse. The wise men protest, though. There is not a man on earth who can reveal the word of the king. And the thing that this king is asking is too difficult, and there is no one who can reveal it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with mortals. That comes from verses 10 and 11. Now, they're right. By their own admission, what the king asks is impossible for humans. Nebuchadnezzar's response? Execute them all, including Daniel and his friends. So here's Daniel facing execution for a test he didn't take, a dream he didn't hear, demanded by a king who's lost patience with the entire wisdom establishment. And what does he do? Let's go to Daniel chapter 2, verses 14 through 23. Join me now. Then Daniel responded prudently and discreetly to Arioch, the commander of the imperial guard of the king, who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked and said to Arioch, the royal official of the king, "Why is the decree from the king so severe?" Then Arioch explained the matter to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested from the king that he would give him time, and he would tell the king the explanation. Then Daniel went to his home, and he made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions, along with the remainder of the wise men of Babylon, would not be killed. Then, in a vision of the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, "Let his name, the name of God, be blessed throughout the ages, for the wisdom and the power are his. And he changes the times and the seasons, and he deposes kings, and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men who know understanding. He reveals the deep and the hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my ancestors, I give thanks and I give praises for the wisdom and the power you gave to me, and now you have made known to me what we have asked from you, for you have made known to us the matter of the king. So there's a few observations I want to make here. Number one, Daniel's response to crisis. Notice what he does not do. He doesn't panic. He doesn't rage against the injustice. He doesn't try to escape or hide. He doesn't attempt to bluff his way through. But what he does is amazing. He responds with prudence and discretion. This phrase really matters, I think. Even facing death, he's measured. He asks questions to understand the situation, and he requests time. He buys a little space to seek God. He then goes to his friends. He doesn't face this alone and prays. He seeks mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Second, there's a contrast with pagan wisdom. The Babylonian men, they relied on techniques, methods, or rituals or calculations. Daniel relies on a relationship, the God of heaven. Their wisdom came from mastering systems. Daniel's wisdom comes from knowing the one who designed the systems. The wise men said, "No one who can reveal it to the king except the God whose dwelling is not with mortals." And they were right more than they knew. But Daniel knew the God who does dwell with his people. Observation number 3, Daniel's prayer of praise. Before Daniel ever goes to the king, he stops to worship. And look at what he declares. Wisdom and power are his, that means God's, not mine. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and he sets up kings. In other words, God is sovereign over political power. He reveals deep things and hidden things. God alone has ultimate knowledge. To you, O God of my ancestors, I give thanks. Covenant relationship, not technique. This prayer is the theological heart of the entire book of Daniel. Everything that follows flows from this. So from Daniel chapter 2, verses 24 through 45, we see that Daniel goes to Arioch and asks to be brought before the king. When Nebuchadnezzar asks if Daniel can tell him the dream and the interpretation, notice Daniel's response from verses 27 and 28. Daniel answers the king and said, "The mystery that the king asks, no wise men, conjurers, magicians, or diviners are able to make known to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what it is that will be at the end of days. This is your dream and the visions of your head on your bed." So Daniel deflects all credit. He's not positioning himself as the super wise man who succeeded where others failed. He's pointing to God. In verse 31, we see the statue with the head of gold. That's Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. Now, that's explicitly stated in verse 38. The chest and the arms of silver, an inferior kingdom to follow. The belly and the thighs of bronze, a third kingdom. The legs of iron and feet of iron mixed with clay, a fourth kingdom that was strong but divided. And then the stone in verse number 34. A stone was cut out, not by human hands. It strikes the statue and shatters it completely. The stone becomes a great mountain filling the whole earth. The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Verse 44. Now what this means, the 4 kingdoms represent the succession of world empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And most scholars, by the way, agree on that progression. But notice, each metal is less valuable, but often stronger. There's a degradation, if you will, happening. Human kingdoms, no matter how impressive, are temporary. The stone cut without hands, that's God's kingdom, which isn't established by human effort or political maneuvering. It doesn't reform the statue or take its place at the top. It just shatters the statue. It shatters the entire system. Nebuchadnezzar's dream wasn't about which empire would win. It was about a kingdom unlike any human empire, one that arrives from outside the system entirely. Last week, we said ambassadors represent their home country while living in foreign territory. This week adds another layer. Ambassadors serve with foreign governments without ultimate allegiance to them. Daniel saved the lives of Babylonian wise men, people who worshipped false gods. He served Nebuchadnezzar faithfully while pointing him to a greater king, and he engaged the power structure without being owned by it. We have 3 principles we can take from Daniel's example. Number 1, crisis reveals where your confidence actually lies. When the death sentence came, Daniel didn't strategize the way out. He just prayed. His first instinct was to seek God and not work the system. And that brings us to the question, where do you turn first when pressure hits? That reveals your functional faith. Second, faithful presence doesn't mean silent presence. Daniel served in Babylon, but he didn't hide his God. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He said that right to the king's face. Now, he wasn't obnoxious about it, but he wasn't ashamed either. Our workplaces, our neighborhoods, and our networks need people who can point to God without being weird about it. We serve temporary kingdoms while representing an eternal one. Daniel gave Nebuchadnezzar his best service, but he never forgot that Babylon was the head of gold. Impressive, but temporary. Every political system, every cultural moment, every empire is a statue waiting for the stone. That's not cynicism, it's perspective. It frees you to serve faithfully without ultimate anxiety. And there's a modern application for us here. You might work for a company whose values you don't fully share. You might live in a cultural moment that feels increasingly foreign, and the temptation there is to either burn it all down or assimilate quietly. Daniel shows a third way: engaged service with clear ultimate allegiance. You can be excellent in Babylon without belonging to Babylon. I want to leave you this in closing. What strikes me about Daniel 2 is that God didn't just reveal the dream to save Daniel's life. He used a pagan king's nightmare to announce his coming kingdom to the entire Babylonian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar thought he was the head of gold, and he was, but he was also just one chapter in a story that ends with a stone not cut by human hands. Daniel understood something Nebuchadnezzar didn't. The most powerful position in Babylon was still temporary. And that's not a reason for despair. It's a reason for freedom. When you know how the story ends, you can serve the present moment with faithfulness instead of fear. My challenge for you this week is this. I want you to identify one situation where you're tempted to either rage against the system or quietly go with it. Your workplace, your extended family, your social circles. Ask yourself, what would it look like to serve faithfully while pointing to a greater kingdom? Not obnoxiously, but clearly. What would prudence and discretion look like in that situation? That's ambassadorship. Daniel did it in Babylon, and you can do it in yours. I'm Steve Sanders. Until next time, reflect Him well. God bless.